Under the same moon, we share the love. Embracing the differences like hand in glove. Spreading peace and joy, it's a beautiful sight. Together we shine in each other's light. And how do we stand in love's pure might? Watching the world share in love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World. We're going to be covering a case that everybody's talking about. In fact, you probably heard me talk about him so many times, Luigi Mangione. And we're privileged, we're blessed to have a law professor with us. Her name is Candace Kelley, and she's been on the show many times before. So let's welcome in Candace Kelley.
Hey, Mel, good to see you. And listen, let us not forget that we covered the Sean Combs trial. That is where we met. So it's not quite over there either, but that October 3rd sentencing hearing was certainly one for the books.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We did cover that trial. We covered it extensively. So now we get a chance to cover another case that everybody wants to know about. So what do you think? Do you think that this is going to be the case of the century?
Yeah, I think that this Luigi Mangione trial is one that people are really looking at. One, because it's garnered the attention not just maybe of a specific niche group. When we talk about Sean Combs, for example, or other cases that are out there where, that was music and pop culture and people were generally interested in celebrity news. Now we are talking about Luigi Mangione, who in the middle of a government shutdown where they are deciding what to do with healthcare. That's the ultimate, the brick wall that they're facing that's stopping this government shutdown from moving to opening back up. Luigi Mangione has put on the table some of those same topics, which is why he's such a divisive person. People see him as a hero because of what he has said about the healthcare system and what his shooting meant and represented, that the healthcare system costs too much money. On the other hand, you have people who think that it's just a cold-blooded killing, which, let's be real, that is what it is. And the court of law, to answer your question, I think is going to think the same too. Even if you have very passionate feelings about healthcare and how much an MRI costs, at the end of the day, there is a lot of evidence that is stacked up against Luigi Mangione, regardless of the dozens of young women who are sitting outside of the courthouse and waiting for him night after night, overnight, to see if they can get a glimpse of him inside of court. A lot of people support him, but at the end, the law is going to speak, Mel.
Yes, indeed. Recently, we've had two shootings where individuals actually wrote words on the bullets. And I didn't realize until today, looking back, that Luigi Mangione actually did that too. He wrote various words on the ammunition.
Yeah, he did. And he wrote words that were cousin to delay, deny. What was the third one? But these are words that people use in the healthcare center, in the healthcare arena. They kind of are signifiers as to what the healthcare arena does when they actually look at a claim that might come through, that you might delay it and ultimately deny it. And these were the words that he put on the bullets, and that's why they were important. There is also a book that has a similar name, and it is all about what the healthcare system does in order to make sure people don't get what they should be afforded to in the healthcare system. Because even before this happened, the healthcare system, what it represented, how much healthcare costs compared to other countries, has always been a topic of discussion for decades. This is why people move to Canada and other countries. And also, if we think about Luigi Mangione, before he shot Brian Thompson. He spent time in Thailand, and that opened his eyes in terms of what the healthcare system costs there, which is a little to nothing. He didn't think it was fair, and according to a lot of reports, that was part of the impetus for him doing this. The healthcare system is corrupt in the United States of America, and he wanted Brian Thompson to be this walking representative of the corruption and of the evil that is out there.
You know, I was shocked because a lot of the young people out on the street waiting all night, you know how that goes, trying to get shot at the main courtroom. A lot of them feel like he had a righteous cause for killing. In fact, when I questioned some of them out there, they said, well, you know, so many individuals die from cancer every day because of being denied, that this was a good thing that he took this posture. What are your thoughts about the younger generation?
You know, sometimes you just need to stay off social media. I listen, and there are going to be people who are watching this and they're going to say, yeah, but you know, the healthcare system is wrong for what they're doing. Well, there are investigations actually into United Healthcare by the Department of Justice for antitrust reasons, as well as the reasons we just discussed. Are they denying certain people coverage? So I think that we have to look at what is going on online and what happens generally, especially with young people. And I'm chuckling because I know that there are a lot of people who are out there who can identify with this. You get online, you're mad about one thing, and then by the time you get off, you're even madder about more things. You are in the middle of an echo chamber. Other people are saying the same thing that you are, and then it just amplifies and amplifies, and all of a sudden you are so mad that going online where you tried to find help actually exacerbated the problem. And I think that young people, old people too, when they get online, you get into these echo chambers, you get into these communities that are saying the same thing that you are, and then everybody leans into each other until they're just leaning until they fall over and it doesn't make any sense. So that's what I think is going on with a lot of these young women. And let's think about it. Someone who's 15, 16 years old, the brains are still being formed. I mean, when they say that you know, love makes someone dumb, this is what we're talking about. They do love this guy. They think he's cute. This is why he has $40,000 in the commissary fund that he has. He's got $1.2 million at least for people who have been donating. There are a lot of young women who are sleeping overnight in front of the courthouse because they think he's a good-looking guy. They think he would make a neat boyfriend. In their head, they're creating this narrative that is fueled by being online. So that's what I think about a lot of the young people, young women especially, and men, I'm sure, who think, wow, this guy is really, really something. He's my hero.
Luigi Mangione has the top-notch profile. Unlike a lot of the shooters that we've seen recently, he has 2 degrees. Would you speak on that?
Yeah, you know, he has 2 degrees from an Ivy League school, University of Pennsylvania. You know, I think in computer science and then engineering. So he's got an undergraduate degree. He's got a master's degree. He has extensive experience in AI. He was a minor in mathematics when he was at UPenn. So this is someone, by all accounts, who is very, very bright, which is also attractive for a lot of people to buy into. He checks off a lot of boxes that make him very normal. And so people see and buy into that normalcy because that's the way we're trained. We're trained to think that someone with an Ivy League degree is going to do well, means well, and is absolutely 100% straight upstairs. So that's another reason why people are leaning into him. But his degrees, you know, show really the type of person that he is. He is someone who knows math well. He is someone who knows numbers well. He is someone who calculates well. Unfortunately, for him, he would say, he didn't calculate this very well. You know, this was someone who really identified or made positive comments about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber back in the late 1990s, who was finally apprehended, but he was apprehended, Mel, after 20 years. This is a guy that was apprehended after 5 days. So yes, he had a lot that was going for him in terms of his books, his education, and his GPA. He was also valedictorian of his high school class. He went to a private boys' school in Baltimore, Maryland. But When we look at what happened after 5 days, him being caught in McDonald's, after a couple of times his mask was taken down, he didn't shave his eyebrows. I mean, that sounds very silly, but if you are calculated enough to have such a distinguishing identifier on you, you got to shave those eyebrows if you think that you want to get away with anything. But these are things with someone as smart as he was, with the smarts that he had, he didn't calculate the right way. And that's exactly why he was caught, especially in this day and age, in the day of digital footprints. This was huge. They found DNA and many things that just led the police to Altoona, Pennsylvania on December 9th.
Not only was he educated, he had tons of money from what we can ascertain from the media. So that's another striking point in this case as well.
Yeah, and this goes to how people identify with other people online too. People naturally gravitate to people with money, right? If you have money, you are somebody. If you have money, you have respect, you have power. And so they like that about him too. His family got their money by way of property investments, as well as they have a home health care facility, and they have two, what are they called? It's like a not a spa, but like golf retreats. Help me out, Mal. But they
have two clubs.
Thank you. They have two clubs. They have two high-end golf clubs and clubs that actually some of their family lives on that campus, if you will, on one of them, with the pool and the nice food. This is a place where someone would go to get married, right? We're talking about the greenery and the trees. Online, very beautiful places. I looked both of them up. So this is a man who, remember, he traveled to Japan and Thailand, Hawaii. There was somewhere where he was getting this money. It wasn't because he worked at a job during COVID, which is what he did for a few years. But that wasn't enough to fuel all of these trips. He got that from the means and sources that he had. But again, people like to identify with other people who have money. This guy, couple of golf clubs within your family, you definitely have money. And people, again, identify that as someone who actually is tight upstairs. He's got money. He's got this education. There can't be anything wrong with him. He's completely sane for thinking that he should kill this man, because there are a lot of things in him. This is what someone might be saying. A lot of things in him that I could see for myself that makes sense. And I don't like the healthcare industry. That's what someone might be saying. Again, making him this hero to some people. And this is why people are going to really be following this story in January, especially when the trial starts.
Could you explain for the audience why there's a state and federal case against him here in New York?
Yeah, well, what happened was that Luigi Mangione, before he came to New York on that December 5th, he actually came a few days before that, but I'm talking about the actual shooting on December 5th. He took a bus up, according to many reports, from Atlanta, Georgia. He crossed state lines from Georgia, then he came into New York City, where he stayed at a hostel. He stayed at the High New York City Hostel right there on Amsterdam Avenue. When he did that, he crossed state lines. And when you cross state lines and then you add the gravity of these crimes to it, you are now in federal territory, where your punishment is at least 1 year in a federal prison. Of course, we know now with the charges that he has, it's at least 25 years to life in prison. But that's why we are in the federal arena. Whenever you cross state lines to begin with, you are now in the Department of Justice territory. You are in federal territory, where your prison sentence is dictated by federal law and federal guidelines, also where you stay by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, ultimately where he's going to serve his sentence, potentially. That's also going to be managed or overseen by federal authorities. So that is why he crossed the state lines from Georgia to New York City.
Okay. Remember when we attended Sean Diddy Combs' trial, on the first day of trial, they showed the video of him attacking Cassie, and they played it like 9 times, I think I counted, right?
Yes.
The video with Mangione is very similar. He shoots the guy in broad daylight and it's right there caught on camera. I mean, you can't identify him, but do you think we have a repeat where this video is just going to take the cake for this case?
Oh yeah, that video is really important. I mean, he ditched some of his clothes, which were found in Central Park after. The prosecutors will be able to connect the dots. They'll be able to, with all of the ring cameras and cameras that are out there, you can really trace exactly from A to Z what he did almost without question. It's like the judge, I think, told us in the Sean Combs trial. Even if we can't see his face, if you can connect the other dots, like the judge said, if someone comes in from outside and they've got rain all over them and they have an umbrella and they shake out their umbrella with that rain, you can kind of assume that it's raining outside, right? You can see the drops kind of, floating off. And here, this video is like that person coming in with a raincoat and rain and being wet all over. You can kind of connect the dots that he's the person who did it. Now, I'm saying that from someone who is not, I haven't gone through the voir dire process. No one's questioned me, and but I'm just thinking logically how someone would be on a trial and sit on a jury. I can't see how they would come up with any other solution unless, and Mel, you and I have talked about this before, unless some of the evidence is suppressed because of how it was attained by the police in Altoona. That's going to be a problem potentially. Otherwise, that video is key. It starts the clock. Actually, what starts the clock is when he leaves the hostel, and they'll connect the dots in the timeline. He gets on his electric bike. They'll see all of that, and that video is going to be very, very important. We're going to see it quite a few times.
Now, in the case with Mangione, he did a good job. He did a good job in hiding his face. He came 10 days early, and he covered his face for the most part. He dropped his mask one time to flirt with a lady that worked at the hostel. What do you think caused him to do that?
Vanity, as well as someone who's just self-interested and self-centered and young. Let's be real. That's what caught him out there. Oops, I forgot. But here's a girl in my line of sight. Let me just flirt with her a little bit. He completely forgot. He completely forgot about what his mission was. You can't take your mask down if you're trying to, commit a crime. There's also a shot of him in that cab. Again, the eyebrows. I think there were a lot of distinguishing things that would have given him away, even if that mask didn't come down. But this is someone who just was caught off guard, and he forgot about what he was doing. And at that age, not surprised. Just not a well executed plan at all. At all.
Usually in these cases, people, they speed away in some car or with a getaway driver. In this case, he strolled off and went and got on his bicycle, as you mentioned. Do you think that's the reason why they lost track of him?
Yeah, let's go back. The shooting actually took place around 6:45 a.m. on December 4th in Midtown. So, when we think about New York is busy no matter what time of day. At that early morning, you probably still have a lot of trucks and cabs, things that he could kind of move into and camouflage himself in. So him walking away might seem like any other person walking early to catch their bus or walking early to go to the job. He certainly couldn't have done it in a car, not in Manhattan, no matter what time, in terms of trying to get away in a getaway car in New York. That's just on the movies, or that's just in different parts of New York, like upstate New York, but not the city. So his plan to go through Central Park, and he dropped off. There was a bag. They say that he allegedly dropped off. It had some Monopoly money in it and some clothing, some Tommy Hilfiger clothing. That was actually the easiest, simplest way if you're going to get in the mind of a Luigi Mangione to get away in the middle of Central Park with a lot going on. In a very, very big park that you have to traverse. Central Park is huge. So with that in mind, not a bad plan when you think about, well, how can I get away? Wouldn't be the train, right? But just walking quietly away, effortlessly, and not even running, I think that he thought that that would work, and it did work up until a point.
Are you shocked that he was able to gather so much information of the man that he took the life of?
No, that's just the digital age that we live in. And people like to post a lot about themselves. And with great ease, you can find a CEO schedule, especially if there's a huge conference dealing with your company and the healthcare system that maybe happens every year, because this was a conference that Brian Thompson was attending. It was scheduled, he was scheduled to speak. He made a guesstimation or maybe even called, we don't know the details, as to what time Brian Thompson was supposed to arrive. Well, you can kind of guess what time he would be leaving the hotel, if he was walking or if he was taking a car. Or you could make the assumption, he's probably walking if it's down the block. Why would you get in a car if it's down the block? So all those things you could really guess and put together. I don't think it's very difficult for people to find out where someone is, especially when they're the CEO of a company. You need to know where a CEO is, and they shouldn't be in hiding, right? So it made sense that he did have access to where he was, and took advantage of it.
They say he kind of grew up a certain way and then he radicalized by reading some books. I think two books stand out, in fact, right?
Yeah, well, there were a couple of books. One, we know that he was a Ted Kaczynski empathizer. He thought, hey, he gave a couple of reviews about, I think, a book on Ted Kaczynski, or he definitely posted about Ted Kaczynski, saying, listen, you might think him insane, but at the end of the day, some of the things he was saying actually made sense. There was also a time where he went abroad, and I'm looking this up in my notes because there were a couple of books, but there was a guy named Josh Deloney, and he wrote a book called Hit Reverse: New Ideas from Old Books. So it talks about different themes that we already know have existed, but then he talks about them in a contemporary context. He loved this book. In fact, he traveled to to India, with the goal of giving him feedback about the book. He bought 400 copies of this book. So there were some people who really influenced the way that he was speaking, thinking, and also just how he saw the world outside of him. Now, there was a time period where he disappeared from his family. That's where his mother actually filed a missing persons report. But during that time, he also traveled and did yoga and tried to find himself, according to some filings. But that being said, he eventually, kind of gathered ideas when he went abroad about how bad America was. And then what he did, or what many people say he did, was find representation of this corporate evil in Brian Thompson. So yes, there were books that were persuading him. There were people that persuaded him, as he was really on a journey of self-discovery, he would probably say. That's why he went abroad, to kind of think a little bit, and do some yoga, he said.
I think his mother said he was missing for at least 141 days, something like that. So they said he was only using cash. So he must have had a lot of cash. I mean, we know he comes from a family loaded, but he had to do some serious planning to go undercover for 140 some days.
Yeah, he did, especially in another country. Now, mind you, some of it's backpacking and, probably eating food that doesn't cost that much, because it's a lower cost of living over there. But you're right. If you're gone for that long, you have been saving money by way of cash, or doing something. Now, all those details we don't know, but just to go abroad, let's think about the ticket, right? To travel to all of these different places. He had to have had some money from somewhere. Again, he worked at a job for 4 years, and then he worked in Hawaii at a co-op living. But that's not the thousands of dollars that you need in order to travel abroad, not for that long and eat. So we'll probably find out more about how exactly he managed to kind of stay off the grid in terms of traveling and where he got that money from.
Okay, so we have close to 200 people in the building. I'd like to ask you to hit the like, share, and subscribe. We're so blessed to have you guys here today. Candace, could you take a moment to tell everyone your background and how you can be reached?
Yes, I'm Candace Kelley, and I teach journalism and media law at Rowan University. I'm also a commentator for various stations. As I said, Mel and I met at the Sean Combs trial. I commentated for about 15 different stations, including this one. And, my goal is to really make sure that people understand the law so that they are empowered. They're not left in the dark, because the taxpayer money that you have going into the system, that's the system that you need to learn and understand, because you are paying for it. And it works differently for all different types of people. So I like to make the law accessible, which is why I break down information to 5-cent words and not 25-cent words. You can follow me at Candace Kelley, Candacekelley TV on Instagram. That is the best way to reach out to me. People may also know me because I co-host Not All Hood. My co-host was Malcolm Jamal Warner. He has passed away, but the show continues. Had some great times with Malcolm, but people may also know me from that show too.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start off with Mo Minor. If his family was rich, why would he have issues with medical care?
Yeah, I thought about that. I just asked my husband that, because when I was looking up these beautiful places that his family own, I'm thinking, they always say people are one broken leg away from being broke. And I just told my husband, he could have broken a leg and been fine. He had the $50,000. His parents definitely had it. So this is someone, what happens when you get online, number one, and when you are in an echo chamber. Remember, when you can get online and you can turn somebody who's all together and turn them just by words into terrorists by things that they read online. That has happened. People have changed the way that they live their life in many, many different ways by going right where we are right now. I am not sure exactly what his journey was, but there are, in terms of really getting into his head, but there are a lot of different ways that people can be turned. People can be turned on to conspiracy theories. People can get inside their heads that this is what is right and this is what is wrong. And remember, he spent a lot of time traveling by himself. That's another echo chamber that sometimes can be really bad and have a lot of repercussions. If the only person that you're answering to and speaking to on a continuous basis is yourself, because then you have just the echoing over and over again, it starts to make sense. So he did have a back problem, right? And apparently he was in a lot of pain. I think that you have all of these moving parts, and I think it just built up to a tipping point where he thought that this actually made sense, because you're right. He had money. What was his problem? But as we know, money doesn't fix all problems, especially problems where it has to do with your mental disposition or even mental illness. And I'm not sure what his situation is, but I can imagine that he has talked to that option as a defense with his attorney, talked about that option, that I was mentally incapable or mentally unstable in this shooting.
They have a lot of discovery from his diary and his note taking. Will that be admissible in court?
It depends. It really depends. It depends upon whether or not, when he was apprehended, whether or not he was Mirandized the proper way. So we've heard of Miranda rights, right? You have a right to remain silent. His attorney has been saying, and that's what Karen Agnifilo, she said, the way that he was apprehended, his Miranda rights were not even read to him until 20 minutes in to after he was approached. And that's true. But then there were certain things that he said that you could argue allowed the police to continue to question him without reading the Miranda rights. And that's where these nuances are going to be argued in court. Did his or were his Miranda rights properly read at the proper time? Because if they were not, then all of the evidence that they got, including the gun, including his writings, including the fake IDs, then all of that evidence would be excluded. So, it really depends upon what is determined by the judge. And we know judges have a lot of discretion as to whether or not this guy was properly Mirandized. And that will determine whether or not major evidence gets in or out. And so that's going to be the most interesting play, I think, so far that we see his defense team making. And that would be one of the biggest defenses that he has. Besides, again, he's, mentally unstable, or, something was the matter with his mental capacity.
For the sake of the audience, Sean Diddy Combs' main attorney, his name was Mark Agnifilo. And I often tell people he also had an additional silent attorney because the wife's name is Karen Agnifilo. And she was, as you and I could see, in many cases, she was kind of coaching him in the background. So Diddy kind of got a 2-for-1, kind of like what I tell people when it comes to Tenny Garagos. Her
and
father, her dad's there. Mark Garagos coaching her. So Diddy kind of picked up these extra attorneys. Do you think in this case that Karen is going to be probably the best out of the attorneys that you know of? You think she's probably the best for this type of case?
Listen, she's, I can tell already she's very good. Here's what you look for in a good attorney. Number one, the fact that she's a woman is very good. You need to have someone who's an empathetic figure, and we look at mothers, women in that way. And if that person has empathy for this young man in the shooting, or seemingly, right, then it really is a good look when it comes to the jury. Oh, this woman is really finding in her heart a place for him. And it makes a really, really big difference. It's kind of like in the Sean Combs trial, we were wondering, well, who's going to give the closing? It's going to make a difference if it was a Black woman, a white man, a white woman, white man. Why? Because we're human. This is America. So I think that she was a great choice. She was there, I think, almost every day with Mark Agnifilo and the other 6-7 attorneys that were representing Sean Combs. I like her arguments. I like what she has filed. And I there's something about a husband and wife team that really goes a long way. They're thinking and breathing and eating that case all day, and that does not hurt for them to be exchanging notes and understanding what's going on, not just in the courtroom, but when they go home. So I think it's a really good look. And we know that this team, or even Mark Agnifilo, he's been on many other high-powered cases and celebrity headlining cases, and he's done pretty well by most accounts.
Now, as we've discussed, this is a death penalty case, right? Do you think they're saying in the media perhaps that he has, or it could be, they're saying he has mental problems? Do you think that will play a part in saving his life?
Yeah, it absolutely could, because if somebody, listen, in any case, like when you watch Law and Order, there are a list of defenses that you have available to you. And one of them has to do with whether or not, you have the mental capacity to do this, or whether or not you're insane, really. Now, a lot of people like him who carry out these crimes, again, and this is like with serial killers, this is with, the Unabomber type, they have too much pride to take that type of defense. They don't want to be seen as this person who was less than mentally. So I think, while I think it's one of his best defenses, I think it's one that someone like a Luigi Mangione is going to have a problem coming to terms with, that he has to be seen from the public in this light. He wants to be seen as the savior. Remember, he was screaming outside as he was being taken into
Right.
the courthouse or to the jail. He wants to be heard. He does not want to be seen as insane, Because if that's the case, then he loses people who are like, oh, he's nuts. No, he wants to be the sane guy who's making sense. So it's going to, be up to him. But his attorneys are probably going to put that on the table to say, this is going to be a good way for you to get out of it. But people like him generally, and I'm thinking about serial killers and just studies that have been done, they do not like to be seen as less than. They like to be seen as making sense, and that killing this guy made sense in the name of the healthcare system and the people who are being taken advantage of.
Do you think that's the reason why he was caught in McDonald's, because he wanted people in a way to know what he did?
Yeah, because let's think about the calculation of all of this. Why did he have the gun on him? Why did he have all of the IDs on him? He could have cut them up, and he went up to I think around 178th Street. He could have cut up all of those IDs and sprinkled them in garbage cans along the way. He could have tossed the gun into the river. He could have gotten rid of his what's being known as manifesto. He kept it all on him. Now that is a very curious thing, but leading back to your question, it might have been an intentional thing. Yep, I'm the one. And I really want to, like many people who commit crimes of this nature, I want to get the credit for it. Or else, why didn't he dump it? And I think that that's a question that will come up in court. And it's going to be played against him. This man was so full of himself and so wanted to be a part of this narrative. He kept all the evidence on him. I think that is how the prosecutors will play it.
They said when he went to Thailand, he went to the gun range. You think they'll try to use that narrative against him as far as intent?
Absolutely. Because what was he practicing for? Unless unless this is something that he did as a child and it was a sport to him. Like we know he did soccer, he did wrestling, he did all these things. But when you look at his history, I don't see anything about him and his love for guns. And it's something that maybe his family took up, like families often do. They go out and they shoot, and that's a part of their culture. I haven't seen that this was a part of his culture, and I think that will definitely be a part of the evidence that's against him. And why be in Thailand, where you're finding yourself, and then in terms of peace and serenity, and then be at a gun range? That's really, really contradicts your whole purpose for being there.
Sean Diddy Combs' case was 8 to 9 weeks if you include the jury selection. How long do you think, and I know it's an unknown fact, but how long do you think this case will go on for?
So Sean Combs had 34 witnesses. And I would say that when we look at Luigi Mangione, we're talking about the police officers that apprehended him, police officers that got the DNA evidence. We're talking about maybe even some family members, maybe some people who he met over in Thailand will be brought in. I can't imagine that this would go over 3 weeks. Because remember, Cassie was on the stand for 4 to 5 days, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, they don't have a key star witness in this way because he's not going to take the stand. And now that shaves off five days right there. You know what I mean? So I cannot imagine this going over 4 weeks. Now, this is going to begin in January. Might be some snow days in there. Trying to think if there are any. We've got the MLK holiday. I cannot imagine that it goes over 4 weeks.
Right. And the Diddy case, the judge was adamant about trying to get this case over with. So hopefully in this case, it won't be an extended period of time. Park Bench says maybe he had a messed up vigilante fantasy. What are your thoughts?
He might have, Lord knows what games he was playing. We know the extent of a little bit of what he was reading. What else was he reading? What else was he doing? Who did he really think he was in terms of, did he think that, I am the chosen one. I'm the one who's going to go out and defend people. I want to be a hero. I want to be this person. I want to be someone better than the person that I am. And I'm going to do that by going out here and committing these crimes. You just don't know what's going on in his head. But speaking of witnesses, we will probably hear from someone who has dealt with people like him, who have committed crimes of this nature, to get into his head to figure out what exactly was going on. And I think that those expert witnesses will be able to give us some context as to whether or not he had some type of vigilante attitude, and that was his goal in all of this. We're going to hear from someone from the stands, I'm sure, who's going to speak to that.
Now, from the media, we learned that he had cut off his family pretty much. Do you think we'll see his family testifying in this case?
You know, we might, because his mother is a connector. His mother is the one who reported him as missing. And then wasn't it his mother or his father who also said, hey, my son kind of looks like this person that I'm seeing on TV who we haven't heard from in a very, very long time. It was 16 days before the shooting that she actually reported him as missing. As you mentioned, though, he had been gone for months, but in terms of her saying, okay, I'm going to report this, it was 16 days before the actual shooting on December 4th. So I think that any mother might want to get on the stand and make a plea for their son. He might have a sibling that might be willing to do that. I would imagine that we might hear from some family members, because we're going to get more context as to what was really going on. And that's one thing I think we both learned from, not just all the trials that we've covered, but the most recent one, especially what we thought was going on based upon media reports needed a lot more context that we got in the Sean Combs trial during that 8 weeks. You understood, okay, this is, all along, just quickly, I know that I digress, but I mean, we heard so much about children and tapes and freak off video. We didn't see any of that in the video. So we know what we've been reading in the media, but, or we didn't see any of that in the case. So we know what we've been reading in the media, but what's really to come and what really is the real deal, we will not know until those witnesses take the stand.
Okay, so we're going to pause here and just ask for those in the audience. We have quite a few people. Please take a moment to hit the like button, share, and subscribe. And for the new people that came in, just tell people what you do on the day-to-day.
All right, I'm a legal analyst. I am also a professor. I teach media law at Rowan University. Great program down there, by the way. And I like to teach the law. I like to make sure that people know about the law so that it's more accessible. I can be reached at Candace Kelley TV on Instagram.
Now, in the case of Mangione, do you think the lady that turned him in at that McDonald's, I believe it was a lady, do you think we'll hear from her at the court case?
Yeah, we're going to get all the dots connected. She would be one of them. Absolutely. In fact, we might even hear from the man who said, hey, that kind of looks like him. And then the employee who I think actually made the call. I think you're right. I need to get that straight. But anybody who's been in that, that chain of people that will take him from New York to the actual arrest, we got to hear from them to hear exactly what happened. And when you count it up, it really is about 10, 12 people, and then maybe some other folks who might testify on his behalf and some expert witnesses. That's why I say maybe 20 people we'll hear from, but we will definitely hear from the person who said that looks like Luigi Mangione.
Okay, Robert Papa says, premeditated murder is premeditated murder. In New York, there's no death sentence, so life in prison if he is guilty. Why are they saying the death penalty in New York?
All right, so it's life in prison, 25 years to life for the second-degree murder charge for the state charges. Remember, there are a lot of charges going on here. You've got the Pennsylvania charges, then you've got the New York charges, then you've got federal charges, and in all of those charges, they're different sentencing. The first one that we're dealing with, though, is the New York charge, and then he's going to have to face other charges. And as you and I have spoken about, in terms of Pennsylvania, he has refused to show up on the Zoom or video calls to make appearances, if you will, in other courts. So what's been going on in Pennsylvania is all of that has been put on hold. But if we take a look here, and there are quite a few charges, and I wrote them down, I sent them to you too. But when we look at the charges in New York and then Pennsylvania, so federal charges, you've got stalking and firearms offenses. And then Pennsylvania charges, he was carrying the firearm at that time in his bag. And then he was doing it without a license. Then forgery, because he had that identification. Then tampering with records and identification, because it was a fake ID. And then possessing instruments of a crime. Then you go to the New York charges, that's second-degree murder, that's 25 to life. And then 7 counts of criminal possession of a weapon. And then 1 count of possessing false identification. There were terrorism charges that were on those on the state level, but the judge actually dropped those particular charges, those terrorism charges.
Yeah. When I went to court, they basically said they couldn't detect that he was trying to threaten the New Yorkers at large, and that's why basically the terrorism was dropped.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was just agreeing. I'm saying, yeah, there were. They said that a large enough people were not threatened. Sure.
Is there any chance that he could get off because he's the modern day Robin Hood?
You know, there's a chance that his sentencing might be not as severe based upon whether or not evidence is let through. And that goes back to the argument of Karen Agnifilo and whether or not was he Mirandized properly. If he wasn't, then that evidence is suppressed. Other than that, unless you get some type of jury nullification, which that happens when the jury has heard all the facts and it seems kind of obvious, I will say, that this is the person who committed the crime, but for some reason they've decided, you know what, forget about what we just heard. Not guilty. Could that happen? If you go through the proper voir dire process as an attorney, which is that, you know, for folks who don't know what voir dire is, that's when you ask questions of potential jurors to make sure they're what are called impartial jurors, meaning that they can decide based upon the evidence, they can block off anything that they've heard coming before the case and appearing in court. And if they've chosen impartial jurors, he's not getting away. I wouldn't be able to see jury nullification in that case. I think that you have enough people and enough good attorneys here who can ask questions to make sure that no one's going to, just, flip everything over and flip the justice system on its back and say, forget what we just saw, not guilty.
Okay, Zachary Smith says it's not about what's right or wrong, but what can actually make real changes happen.
Yeah, and he might be he I'm not sure which way he's going. Does he mean not right or wrong, meaning that he could be right in a shooting and that would change things in the healthcare system? I'm not sure exactly which way his particular comment was going. But there are a lot of people that believe, both sides, that, hey, this is bringing attention to the healthcare system. And then on the other side, people are saying, yes, this is bringing attention to the healthcare system, but it's also bringing attention to the conspiracy theorists, to the echo chambers, to the people who are online, and in their head, they're doing ridiculous things that are putting people at harm and the risk of harm, and also killing them. You can't just kill someone in the middle of the streets. And I know people can make arguments about what the government is doing with ICE and what police officers are doing in many situations, or what regular people are just doing. But you cannot just take it upon yourself to say, I'm going to kill someone because I think they're evil. You're not going to win in court. Those facts don't add up.
When Sean Diddy Combs' case started, you couldn't really say anything positive about him or his family, or people would get upset because they say, oh, this guy, he's a loser. In this case, we have people coming in with strong passion for Mangione. Do you think they will need to beef up the security because he's going to have some hardcore fans there?
Yeah, he's going to have some hardcore fans there. He's also going to have young hardcore fans there. The only thing that might be a little bit of a limit is going to be cold in January in New York City. And so during the Sean Combs case, people were there at 3 a.m., sometimes the day before, right? 2 days before, during those first couple of weeks. Being outside in January in New York, when it's, 20 degrees, that's a tough thing. So that's going to help manage the crowd, but you're certainly going to have a lot of people and a lot of younger people who, in the name of the healthcare system, are going to make sure that their voices are heard. The other thing is that because there's going to be a whole lot of press that's down here, you get a lot of people who are down there and they are sharing other messages that, war protesters and things of that nature. So it's going to be a ground right for people to descend upon and share whatever message they have. But you got to remember that it's going to be cold. It's going to look a little different than the lines with the Sean Combs case.
I saw an article in the newspaper, I believe, that said that he's the ambassador in the jail. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me when Sean Combs went back after he was found not guilty, and everybody at MDC, they gave him a standing ovation, right? A couple of things. People think that he's well-mannered, and actually that goes to both of them, Sean Combs and Luigi. And, guards like that. They like a well-mannered person in prison. You also have this hero identity that follows him behind bars. So that if he's the ambassador, if he's the person of hope, right? The person who's able to amass $1.2 million at least for his legal fund from people out there in the world who could hardly afford eggs, right? $40,000 in his commissary fund in order to get whatever beef jerky and salmon that he wants. This is someone who they see as someone they want to be like. Again, he's got money. He's good looking by many people's accounts. He's young. He acts accordingly in jail and follows rules. So yeah, this is an ambassador word that's kind of like the hero, the equivalent of a hero outside in the world that we live in. So on the inside, it's the same as the outside. He, interestingly enough, I'm not surprised, but he is regarded in a very high way by some.
I was out in the street talking to some of the people trying to attend his trial or the hearing.
Yeah.
And allegedly, well, this is what some of them told me. They said, he was bisexual. So you had young teenage girls and boys out there just hoping to get a glimpse of him. Isn't that something? You know what?
So who did you speak to? Now, listen, these young people, either they can sleuth or maybe they knew firsthand. I have not heard that part. So you have to tell me more. That's what they were saying as they were waiting outside for him?
Out in the streets, yeah, that's what they were talking about.
Maybe that comes from, so he did send a text to someone that he knew when he was in Thailand, something that alluded to the fact that, he almost got tricked by one of the trans people out there in Thailand. But that's all I've heard in terms of anything having to do with sexuality. I haven't heard specifically about anything about him being bisexual or have you, which is really interesting. If he is, that's another analogy that we can make with Sean Combs, which, as we know, actually has nothing to do with the trial. And I think, I don't know if I talked to you about this, but I think it would have actually been unfair to try to make this, back to Sean Combs having anything to do with him being gay. Like that wasn't on trial, So I'm glad that was not brought up because a lot of people have a lot of feelings about that. In addition to that, we didn't hear about him having sex with men. So it's interesting, though, just to look at the analogies in both and how one started out as a celebrity, Sean Combs, and then Luigi, he now is a celebrity, right? In terms of what he can amass and the fact that he can wear a sweater that's going to sell out in Nordstrom's. That's someone who's got a lot of influence.
Definitely. Gold Digger says, was he on any form of medication for mental health? And if so, did he stop taking it?
That is a very good question. I have not seen that mentioned. I don't know if you have, Mel, but if he was on medication, that will be very helpful to his case. But I have not seen that yet.
Okay, so that leads to a legal question. Let's say, for instance, he was on pain meds because he was having lower back pain. I think there's someone in the audience named Matt Q to say he's going through a lot of pain too, and he can understand. And this happened while he was on drugs. Is there any, and prescription drugs, is there any argument or softening here?
Absolutely. Mel, you remember during the Sean Combs case where we heard about the continuous use of drugs by Sean? I mean, he was basically an addict, as in every day. But we heard it later on in the case, and we talked about how, wow, if maybe they had introduced him as this drug addict who didn't know what he was doing, that would have been one thing. They did do that, but it happened so much later in the case, it didn't have as much of an effect. If this young man was on drugs and he was off them and on them, and they changed the way that he thought, that will definitely help him. What you're looking for from the jurors is a good reason, legally sound, but also a little sympathy. More than that, empathy. You're probably going to have someone on those stands who's been on a painkiller and understands that. Anytime you have drugs involved or anything that is on the outside that affects how you think is always good for the defense, because it plays into the fact that they didn't really do this by their own volition. It was the drugs that did this, or it was because they were molested when they were young, or it was because they had a head injury. This is how the court of law works. What are these things that might help this defendant not only during the trial, but also during sentencing? So it definitely will have an effect if he was on some type of prescription drugs.
Wow. Would you believe we're down to our last 3 minutes? It's something.
Oh, my goodness. All right. That went by really quick. I don't know what that says, but that went by really quick, Mel.
Yeah. Matt Q says, if they nail him, it just shows corporations run this country.
If they nail him, it shows that well, if they nail him, that means that the prosecutors did their case. I mean, really, it is all, don't get me wrong. We know that if you were in the court of law, justice works differently for different people of different sexes, different skin color, different everything. But if you really look at the facts of this particular case, okay, you have people from all different walks of life, all different races that are affected by the idea of what he was doing in terms of how people feel about healthcare. Because either you have healthcare or you don't, or you're trying to get it, or you're paying a monstrous amount a month. So a lot of people from all different types of the cross sections of humanity, healthcare affects. But when you look at this evidence, the man had the gun that matched the casings in his bag. Period. If you're a juror and you're told, what do you think the evidence is going to lead you to? I'm not sure where you can go with that. I'm not sure that that's corporate wins or healthcare wins. That's just evidence winning and good lawyering winning, and the evidence speaking very loudly to the jury. That's how I see it. And I know that the arguments can be made otherwise, but we're going to the court of law, which is a totally different arena than the court of public opinion and what you can post. Who is on that jury? They're the ones who are going to get that evidence.
And allegedly, he had written in his journal, I believe in October, that he wanted to whack the CEO of United Healthcare, whatever it's called. But at any rate.
And that, my friend, is evidence, right?
Yeah, so that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
So could you take a moment and just explain to everyone what we're going to bring to the table for this case live.
Yeah. So, Mal, you and I have been hanging on in there for a little bit with the Sean Combs case. What we're going to do is we're going to go live every week. Everybody tell a friend. We'll give you the updates on Luigi Mangione. We're going to go into his life. We are going to go into his childhood. We're going to go into the case itself, what he's being charged with, what he faces. We're also going to go into some of the people who he admired and really go behind the headlines to understand Luigi Mangione, to understand Brian Thompson. Let's not forget the victim, the dead man in this case, which we often do, right? But we're going to learn about all of this as we lead into the court. Because Mel, if you could comment on the fact that the case kind of really starts before you get into court, right? That's where we are right now.
Definitely covering the Luigi Files. I'm looking forward to working with you on it. I want to thank you so much for coming on. I know the audience really appreciated having you as well. And every week we're going to be, especially as we get close to the trial, we'll be covering the different points. We have to tell them it's not easy to go into the courtroom, not fall asleep and take good notes, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we go live at lunch. Sometimes that evening. It's a lot of work that goes into it, but I look forward to working with you. And also, in regards to the audience, we want to thank everybody for participating. There was a lot of good questions. Wonderful night.
Yes.
Would you like to end with some closing remarks?
Well, listen, the Luigi Files, make sure that you tell a friend, as I said, this is not just for us, it's for you too, because thank goodness we have platforms where we can all talk about the issues that are affecting us. And we're just excited to walk you through and we'll keep you posted about when we are going to be on air and going live.
All right. Thank you. And everyone, please have a great night. Thanks.
Different voices, but the same song. Living a world where we all belong. Kindness leading the way, breaking the chains. In the symphony of love, the thing remains. Embracing diversity, brighter days in sight. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. The colors of harmony, painting the night. United we